Joseph Duggar
is calling you from
Washington County Detention.
Joseph Duggar is accused of molesting a then 9-year-old girl, but now details from an affidavit are adding a critical piece to this puzzle. What investigators claim happened before his arrest, according to that document. And if these allegations are true, what does it mean? How damaging is it? We're going to unpack this explosive affidavit for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Real quick, before we go any further, I got to tell you about this app that I think you're going to love. Our sponsor, Upside. Why do I say that? Because you get cash back. Upside gets you cash back. Extra cash back on everyday purchases like gas, groceries, takeout. So here's what you do. You download Upside for free. You claim an offer at one of their 100,000 plus locations. You pay like normal with your card. You verify the purchase. And just like that, money back. So say I need to get gas or I want takeout one night, I'll search for Upside offers first. And after I spend, money appears in my app that I can transfer right into my bank account. Now, Upside's frequent users, they earn an average of $254 back a year. So to start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code. Use our promo code SIDEBAR because you get an extra 25 cents bonus on every gallon on your first tank of gas. So here we are again. We have another Duggar son, another set of charges, another child involved, another series of allegations, and an affidavit that I will tell you right now is going to make you put down whatever you're holding and just sit with how disturbing these claims are. The Duggar family has been in our orbit for nearly 20 years. 19 kids and counting, a TLC empire built on the image of wholesome Christian family values, matching outfits, courtship rules, whole lot of blessings, and then came Josh Duggar, the 2015 scandal. His sister's coming forward, the documentary, the federal conviction for child pornography, that 12-year sentence that he's serving right now in Texas. We've watched this saga unfold in real time. So when the news broke last week that Joseph Duggar, the 7th child, the one who seemed to fly under the radar, the one married to Kendra with their 4 kids, their quiet Instagram presence, that now he has been arrested on child molestation charges out of Florida, the reaction from a lot of people was something like, not again. Now, again, these are allegations. He hasn't been convicted. But you start reading the affidavit and you realize this isn't just another headline. This is a 31-year-old man, a father himself, allegedly preying on a then 9-year-old girl during a family vacation in Panama City Beach out in Florida in 2020. And the way it allegedly happened, it reads like what experts often describe as grooming. It reportedly starts with asking her to sit on his lap, then it's the couch, then it's a blanket, and then according to the affidavit, it escalates from there in ways that we're going to walk you through with our guest in just a moment, because the progression is something that every parent needs to understand if these allegations are true. Now, before police even arrested Joseph, they did something pretty interesting. According to the affidavit, they apparently asked the victim's father to call him, and Joseph allegedly did something that most people in his position would never do. Authorities claim, he confessed. According to police, he said something during that call that we're going to take a closer look at. He said, quote, his intentions were not pure. And if that is true, right, if there's some sort of recorded evidence of this, testimony of this, intent, that's key in a criminal case like that. And just when you thought that this story couldn't even get more layered, comes the news that days after Joseph was booked, his wife Kendra was also arrested. She's facing misdemeanor charges out in Arkansas. He's facing the same ones, by the way, endangering the welfare of a minor and false imprisonment. So completely separate from what Joseph is accused of in Florida, but the rumor is that it has something to do with locks on the outside of their children's bedroom doors. Couldn't officially confirm this. We don't know if this is the allegation, but this is a source is telling a major outlet. Now, that part of the investigation is still unfolding. We're going to get into what we know and what we don't know. And to help us break this down, we're going to bring on somebody who does this every single day. He's a civil litigation attorney. His practice is centered on representing survivors of child sexual assault. He knows how grooming works. He knows how these cases are built. He's going to walk us through this affidavit line by line, because what's in these pages isn't just a list of accusations. It's an alleged roadmap of how an adult is accused of isolating and manipulating a child, and then allegedly apologize for it.
You been here before? No, I'm
So first I want to establish what we already know about this case. Joseph Duggar was arrested in Arkansas on March 18th on a Florida warrant, charging him with 2 counts of lewd and lascivious behavior, one involving a victim under 12, one involving conduct by someone 18 years or older. The allegations date back to 2020 when Joseph was 25. His wife Kendra was pregnant with their 3rd child. And according to the affidavit, the incidents happened during a family vacation in Panama City Beach. And the accuser, who was 9 at the time, she's now 14, detailed everything in a forensic interview with Arkansas detectives. Here is what we've learned since the arrest. Before that forensic interview even happened, the accuser's father seemingly confronted Joseph directly on March 17th of this year. That's why we're talking about it. And this is according to the affidavit. And Joseph apparently admitted the allegations were true. That is when law enforcement asked the father to call Joseph again, this time with a detective apparently listening in. And Joseph allegedly made admissions, including, and we mentioned before, that he said his intentions were not pure. So you have an apparent confession, possibly on a recorded line, before police even knocked on his door, right? 2 days after Joseph was booked, the Tontitown Police Department in Arkansas announced that both Joseph and his wife Kendra had been charged with 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a minor and 4 counts each of false imprisonment. Again, misdemeanors seemingly unrelated to the Florida charges per se. A source told People and Us Weekly that the charges came following a home inspection and involved locks installed on the outside of the children's bedroom doors. Now, that hasn't been confirmed by law enforcement. It's the only explanation out there right now, so we're telling you what it is. Kendra was released on bond. Joseph remains in custody. Now, the family has started responding as well. We're going to get into that, how it might play into this case as well. So a lot to get into. Okay, so that's where we are right now, and I want to get into what is actually in this affidavit because details matter. So joining us to break it all down is Chris Klotz, civil litigation attorney who represents survivors of child sexual assault, involved in nationwide litigation, by the way, against Catholic clergy, the Southern Baptist Convention, the Boy Scouts of America. Chris, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here. Glad to give you any insight that I can. As a matter of fact, this is right in our backyard. Panama City is just a short drive from where we are, and I actually have had cases over there before. So very
Really?
familiar with that jurisdiction. Yes.
And anything we should know about how cases are handled there, how judges view this, how juries view this?
Well, as you know, we live in the Bible Belt. This is a fairly conservative area, and so I can imagine that these cases are serious, no matter what state or what city or what county they are in. But I can tell you that we have there's a small town vibe in Panama City Beach area, in the Panama City area, and these kind of cases are not going to be favorably looked on, which is as it should be.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's get in, before we even get into the affidavit itself, I just want to ask you a bigger picture question. So you've spent your career representing survivors in some of the largest abuse cases in this country. When you see a case like this, where the allegations involve grooming, where there are reports of a confession, an apology, and you're dealing with a pretty, high profile person, at least the family is, what stands out to you as either typical or unusual compared to cases you see and try?
Yeah, so an answer directly comes to mind, but I want to be cautious when I say this because it's not everybody and it's always dangerous to generalize. But when you see people that are inserting themselves in the path of children in kind of an unusual way, and his social media presence and the whole concept and theme of the TV show with having many kids and inserting yourself in that way, sometimes it can be something to at least raise your radar to take a look at. And so, I have seen people that insert themselves in the cases that I've had. I have seen people who insert themselves as youth counselors or as, chaperones or place themselves in the path of children with bad intent. And so this is another example of somebody who has surrounded themselves in a environment rich with young people who are vulnerable, and has apparently, allegedly, according to the allegations, taken advantage of the children that he's been around. And it's just, it's something that is just a part of humanity that we see way too often.
I want to walk through what's actually in this affidavit, okay? And I want to try to go piece by piece because I think that the progression here is really important for people to understand. So we're going to be quoting from People magazine's reporting on the affidavit throughout. So I want to start from the beginning. So according to People, the accuser, who was apparently 9 years old at the time, told investigators that during this 2020 family vacation to Panama City Beach, and again, she's older now from when this allegedly happened, but apparently said
Yeah, I
during
think
this,
she's 14 now.
yeah, 14, during this family vacation to Panama City Beach, Joseph allegedly asked her to, quote, sit on his lap numerous times. When she would sit on his lap, he would, quote, cradle her with his arms. Okay, let's start right there. That in and of itself, Chris, that wouldn't necessarily be a crime, but it kind of is a lead up, right?
So there's a couple of different, in Florida, there's a couple of different statutes in play. There is a statute that is sexual battery, which from the allegations that I've heard, this doesn't sound necessarily like it would fall in the sexual battery statute under the Florida statutory scheme, which generally involves some type of penetration. A fondling or groping case can be, can be pretty broadly interpreted. And so from what I've read in the allegations that have been put forward, the actual physical touching doesn't matter if it's on top of the clothes or under the clothes. Touching, if it's an unlawful, touching done for the purposes of sexual intent or sexual gratification, it's pretty broad. So the fact that there is, the fact that a child sits on a grown up's lap or maybe gets a hug or is held by them doesn't necessarily automatically make it a sexual offense, but that line can be crossed very, very quickly. And from what I have seen in the allegations, that line appears to have been crossed in such a way that it's given rise to an arrest warrant.
So according to this affidavit, it was this alleged pattern that shifted over the course of the vacation because the accuser told investigators that Joseph began asking her to sit on the couch beside him. And then, and here's where it allegedly escalates, he, quote, covered the parties with a blanket. Once they were covered, the affidavit says, Joseph would, quote, pull the victim's dress up and touch the victim's thighs. And she described that he would, quote, touch the top portions of her thighs and would inch higher and higher, closer to the victim's waistline. Chris, I first want to start here. One, if you didn't have an alleged admission, an alleged confession, it'd be very difficult to prove this unless it was just, there was photographs someone took, or is it just the accuser saying something like this happened? Because you're not going to have forensic material. Would it be tough to prove this if you didn't have an alleged admission?
Listen, we have cases all the time where you have a very credible young person whose only evidence is their statement. It makes the case more difficult if there's no physical evidence, if there's no forensic evidence. It does make the case a little bit more difficult, but we have to be able to pursue these cases if you have a credible survivor, complaining witness, victim, whatever the word is that is used in the police report in this instance. But when you have somebody that is making a credible allegation, especially if it's happening on a repeated basis, there needs to be very close attention paid to those. And I know that the prosecutors in these cases, and I know that the law enforcement in these cases try very, very hard to do the best they can to investigate whether they believe that the reporting party is credible or not. But you have to be able to move forward, even if there's no forensic evidence in these cases where you have credible evidence, because there's tons of cases that don't have any forensic evidence. And when you have a child who's described something that has happened on a repeated basis, let's just argue one end of the extreme. I mean, could he have accidentally grazed her thigh when, they were sitting under a blanket together or watching TV? Maybe that could happen accidentally one time, but when you have a pattern of conduct that's happening and it's making the child feel uncomfortable, I really think, you really need to give serious gravity to the statement of the child.
And by the way, this shows, if the specifics of this, it shows absence of mistake, right? It's not like, oh, I was walking by and I, by accident I brushed. It's the alleged deliberate nature, the specificity of this that would show a mistake is not a viable defense or a potential defense.
Listen, if you got a grown up, if you have an adult male or female, but let's just say male in this case because it is a male. If you have an adult male that is putting his hands on the thigh of a 9-year-old child under a blanket and inching his way up, you're going to have a pretty strong idea about what a jury is going to do when they hear that.
Yeah. So let's continue on with the affidavit. It states that
Sure.
during these incidents, and the accuser said they happened, quote, several times, okay, goes to this idea of what we just talked about, absence mistake or alleged absence mistake. Joseph's hand allegedly, quote, grazed the victim's genital area with his hand outside of her underwear. The accuser described feeling uncomfortable and confused. Now, Chris, go back to what you say. What are you taking away from that description there?
Well, that a child has to be in that position in the first place is just disturbing. That kind of conduct, it, it, there's almost no way to say that's an accident. It's a stretch to say that type of conduct is going to be an accident, because if this is a person, if the accused in this case is a person who's around children regularly, and one of his in his social media and his TV shows is around children all the time, it's going to be a mix of young men, mix of young women. A grown-up man or woman hopefully knows what boundaries are appropriate. And what has been described is just, there's no way that it really fits into the realm of being appropriate conduct. The one thing I'm not sure, and not to answer a question with a question, but I don't know, do we have information on how they were in proximity with one another? Is it friends, family, friends? I don't know.
I can't say definitively. I don't think that's made 100% clear. But why? Why is that important for you?
Yeah. If you have a young lady like this that's put in an environment where she's with people that she's familiar with, may have a certain comfort level. If she's not very familiar with Mr. Duggar, or the environment that she's in, she may be less likely to speak up if something inappropriate is going on. If she doesn't have a safe person around, if she doesn't have a safe adult that she's familiar with to say, hey, I'm not really sure exactly what's going on, but this doesn't feel right. And having a parent or a trusted friend, or a safe adult, as sometimes said, to talk to, can make a difference. And so sometimes, again, being a little bit reluctant to completely generalize, but you see people who are preying on children, separating them from the herd, or separating them from their zone of safety or people of safety. And so I would be curious to know, in this case, did he kind of pull her away from people that may have been a safety net for her? Was there any type of kind of grooming to get her to come off by herself? Those are kind of questions that I would want to know some answers to, moving forward on the case. And I'm sure the law enforcement's probably investigated that.
So here's something else that complicates the picture. I think this is arguably the potentially the biggest piece of evidence, right? The alleged admission. So according to the affidavit, Joseph, quote, eventually approached the victim and apologized for his actions. And after that apology, quote, the incidents stopped occurring. I want to go this a little bit further here. Now, we mentioned before about Joseph reportedly saying his intentions were not pure, okay? Here's how that actually went down according to people's reporting on the affidavit, that after the victim's forensic interview, Deputy Sheriff Darrell Norris of the Bay County Sheriff's Office, quote, requested the detective and victim's father call Joseph. On that call, according to the affidavit, Joseph allegedly admitted his actions, stating he touched the victim over her clothing, and then he admitted his intentions were not pure. Chris, over to you. Arguably the biggest piece of evidence, but I have a question here. Will that all come in? Is that standard? You don't hear every day like an admission like that. And I wonder, a defense attorney can say, wait a second, how did this exactly happen?
100%. So, as part of my past as an attorney, I've done a ton of criminal defense work early in my career. And so, if I was a criminal defense attorney, in this case, representing Joseph, one of the things I would look at, of course, is the statement made freely, voluntarily, with knowledge? And was there, a situation where he should have been Mirandized before he made those statements? So those things will all be questions that are going to be addressed by Joseph's criminal defense lawyer. when it comes time for this to be brought forward in court. There will probably be some motions to exclude the statement, I would imagine, that a competent defense lawyer would file those types of motions on behalf of Joseph in this case, just to make sure that everything was done procedurally correctly. Is it a little bit unusual maybe for law enforcement to have a family member or victim's family call a perpetrator and solicit a statement? Perhaps. I'm a little bit unclear of the details about who was on that phone call. I'm not sure if a law enforcement officer was on that phone call while that call was being made with the admissions or not. So that would be something that I would definitely want to run down. Let's say though,
And
the
whether
defense lawyer makes,
if he knew there was a detective on the phone call.
it could make a difference. It could make a difference to a judge, could make a difference under the law. So that's something that, competent criminal defense lawyer is going to bring all those things up in motions practice as this case works its way through the criminal justice system. But let's say you get to the end of that process and the judge says, everything was done by the book. These statements are coming in. That's going to be really hard to explain to a jury. And I don't have a crystal ball. But if I was on a jury, or if you kind of put yourself in the shoes of what a normal jury would do, hearing that you had contact like that with this child, then you said, it wasn't, my intentions weren't pure. That is really damning evidence that a jury is probably going to look very hard at.
And I guess also, like, if it's recorded, you have to say to the person it's recorded, right? Like, hey, this is a recorded call.
It depends. That's a really interesting question. So Florida is a two-party state. And if you are originating a telephone call to somebody in the state of Florida and you intend to record it, then you have to let them know, and give them an option to, say, I don't want it to be recorded, or get off the call, or whatever. I have seen instances, for instance, I'm going to say, I think the call was originated from Arkansas in this case, if I remember correctly, is where the victim is from, if I remember correctly. But I'll give you an example because I know this for sure. Mississippi is a one-party state. So if you make a phone call to somebody and you're in Mississippi and you call somebody that's in another state and it's a two-party state, you don't necessarily have the same need to warn as you would as if the origination of the call comes from a two-party state. So a lot of it will boil down to, when the victim's father called, is he in a one-party state or a two-party state?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Can make a big difference.
It's a really good point. Let's talk about what he's charged with. So he's charged with 2 counts of lewd and lascivious behavior, 1 for molestation of a victim less than 12 years old, and 1 for conduct committed by a person 18 or older. Why 2 separate charges here? How are they different? How are they going to be prosecuted?
So I haven't seen the charging document, but if I had to base, my best estimate is that there was more than one occasion of touching. And that's consistent with what you've read, from the affidavits, and consistent with what we know is that this happened on multiple occasions. So I'm estimating that is a reflection of, this wasn't one isolated conduct. It was a pattern of conduct that it seems like it happened over a period of time, maybe a couple of days.
Now, I haven't even touched on the Arkansas charges. Can we talk about that real quick? So both
Sure.
Joseph and Kendra, they are facing 4 counts each, these misdemeanors of endangering the welfare of a minor, and 4 counts each of false imprisonment. Now, a source told people, this was a source, that those charges came about because of a home inspection and involve locks or alleged locks on the outside of the children's bedrooms doors. Now, this hasn't been confirmed by law enforcement, but I was thinking about this, Chris, and it wouldn't surprise me that what happened was he gets hit with these charges in Florida, and authorities then have to go to the home to see what's happening. Would that be typical? Would I be wrong there?
So they could, of course, they could make an application for a warrant. And if there was something that they were looking for and they had the basis to ask for a warrant to be issued, they would have to kind of transfer that to the state where the warrant would be executed. So I'm not clear on if they were executing a search warrant looking for any type of evidence. I don't know if they were exercising an arrest warrant. I know that he's been arrested up there. My understanding is he's waived extradition, is what I have read, is that he's waived extradition. So that will speed up the process of him going from his home state to where he was arrested down to Panama City Beach. But it kind of depends on what the warrant was for. Was the warrant just an arrest warrant, or was the warrant for a search for evidence? And so I would need to know a little bit more about that. But completely foreseeable that if they go into the home to serve an arrest warrant, and then while they're in there executing the arrest warrant, they see some things that look suspicious or unusual, and then they make a note of that because that is a situation where they had permission to be there to execute an arrest warrant, and they see something that's out of order or strange that needs to be followed up on. That would be a way for them to have access to that information.
I wanted to get your opinion about one more thing, the family. This is an emotional aspect to it, but I also wonder if it's going to be a legal aspect to it. So what do I mean? So as you might have expected, the family has started to respond, and the reactions are very interesting. You have Duggar, who spoke about the arrest on her podcast. She was visibly emotional. She said, quote, "It has been such a long week. It's been one of those weeks that feels like years. And I did not think my heart could break like it has this week. The pain and heartbreak that we've had over this, and just thinking of how it's affected so many, it's just unthinkable, so hard and painful on many levels." Jill Duggar, husband Derek Dillard, they put out a statement on the family blog. They said, quote, "We were shocked yesterday evening to learn of Jill's brother's arrest. We are shocked and heartbroken. We strongly condemn abuse. We support the rule of law and hope that justice will be achieved. Our hearts go out to the innocent juvenile victim of this unspeakable crime and her family. We pray God gives her strength, comfort, and hope, and that she's able to get all the help and support she needs and deserves in the days ahead." Josh Duggar, remember, he's currently serving that 12-year sentence in Texas for receiving child sexual abuse material. His lawyer released a statement to Us Weekly on his behalf, and it's worth kind of reading exactly what it said. Josh Duggar does not know the details of the claims that have been made against his brother Joseph, but he knows the media frenzy that any incident regarding his family creates. He feels for his brother because everything is amplified out of proportion by the media interest in his family. This makes the pain of the criminal justice process exponentially worse. Josh prays for his brother, and he hopes that he can stay strong. He, too, has felt the crushing wave of accusation that is powered by the media spectacle to which his family is subjected. The only reason, Chris, I think this could be relevant is if you're dealing with a situation where Joseph pleads guilty or is found guilty, and there might be statements made on his behalf of some kind in court regarding sentencing, because I don't see them having any role as witnesses in the case unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I wouldn't see them as witnesses necessarily as fact witnesses. Could they be mitigation witnesses? Mitigation witness is somebody who comes in who said, hey, this is out of character for the person. Never heard of them doing anything. They've lived an upstanding life. That's a mitigation witness, which is trying to convince the judge to usually give a lesser sentence. Those type of witnesses appear all the time, in a post plea situation or a post trial where there's a sentencing situation. So would they have any information about what actually happened, in Panama City, and the facts of the case unfolding? Probably not. Would they appear for their family member to say, hey, this is generally a good person, this is out of character, please give him the least possible sentence that would be expected? But something that what you just told me about, that his brother is actually doing a sentence right now.
Yeah.
Again, always try to be very careful with generalizations, and there's no excuse for abusing children. There's no excuse. But sometimes, by way of trying to understand how these things happen, now that you've mentioned that, I wonder, is there any type of abuse history for Joseph or his brother or family, in their background? I don't know, but I have seen enough cases where perpetrators have their own traumatic past. Again, it doesn't excuse what they do in their present, or controlling their conduct on their own, but sometimes it can be something to at least have on the radar to say, hey, is this person a victim themselves in the past? And I have seen in cases where somebody's accused criminally actually bring to the attention of the court, hey, I apologize for engaging in this type of conduct, abusing children. I had my own past, which I think has formed my present. And so I have seen people talk about that in sentencings before, where they're trying to at least explain why they have engaged in this type of conduct. Again, there's no excuse for it. There's never an excuse for child abuse ever. But it can at least help us know that what happens to people as children can impact them as adults and their conduct as adults. And so I think it's always wise for us when we're having these conversations to say, hey, we need to watch out for our own young children and what's happening with them, because what happens to them now as we are parents and caretakers of our children, we need to be mindful to protect them so they don't have experiences which could shape their future in a negative way.
It's a good point. It's a great point, actually. And I've seen that in other kinds of cases for sure. Just to be clear here, look, I haven't seen any evidence, and you said it too, that there's no evidence I've seen or you've seen that would suggest that they were victims of abuse, but something to think about nonetheless, again, assuming these allegations are true. But look, that is where things stand. Joseph is awaiting extradition. Kendra is out on bond. The Arkansas investigation still unfolding. And you have a family that has been through this before. More scandal. Now they're navigating yet another chapter in a story that is continuing. Chris Klotz, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.